Good morning, how are you? You want to check out Alfalfa? Okay. Oh, yep. You want to go check it out with me? Let's go. It's a very kind of historical area of Oklahoma. A lot of different people have lived here and created interesting communities, and so definitely ready to check it out. It's a little cloudy. Hopefully we can dodge the raindrops and it won't be too bad, because we'll be going on some back roads, and muddy back roads in Oklahoma could spell doom if you don't have the right vehicle. Got my Washington Generals shirt on today. If you don't know who that is, that's the team that plays the Harlem Globetrotters and loses every time. So I feel like some of these counties that I go to, they're kind of like the Washington Generals. It's like they're there, you don't really pay attention to them, but they are a necessary part of the show. We're in the southwest part of Alfalfa County to start, and we're at the Sod House, which is an interesting place. I'm going to show you that in a minute, but I want to talk a little bit about Alfalfa County in general. It's a interesting history for sure, and there's even a lot of things that are kind of unknown about it still. It's got a lot of different geological varieties of. There's a big salt plain here to the west. There's some dunes, and just in this area of Oklahoma, the Cherokee outlet, and off even more to the west, the no man's land. It's a really fascinating part of the history. And Alfalfa County was originally part of Woods County. Woods County is to the west, and when Oklahoma became a state in 1907, they kind of drew the lines again and created Alfalfa County out of what was Woods County. This was originally part of Cherokee Nation, and ranching was kind of the primary activity in this part of Oklahoma in the middle 1800s. Woods County was created in 1893. That's a important date because that was the same time as the land run here in Oklahoma, where people were flooding to this part of Oklahoma to claim lands. Formed in 1907, they named the county after both the alfalfa crops that were grown here, and then there was a guy named William Alfalfa Bill Murray, and not the Bill Murray that we all know of, but Alfalfa Bill was the president of the Oklahoma Constitutional Convention, and he was the 9th governor of Oklahoma. And so that's where Alfalfa County gets its name. We're going to learn a lot more as we go, but in the early 1900s, right after statehood, right after the county was formed, it was when the county really grew, and population went all the way up to 18,000 people, and now it's down to 5,699. So man, it's lost a lot of its population. But the railroad was really important. It brought lots of people to this area. The towns grew, and by the year 2000, there was only one railroad that was coming through here. The Sod House is an interesting place to start because there were like thousands of these sod houses all across the western plains here, and this is the only one that is still standing that was built by an original homesteader in Oklahoma. There's a couple more maybe here and there, but there's not very many, and that are still standing in kind of somewhat original form. So I went inside and got a tour. It was $7, and I was the only person that had signed this sign-in sheet. And so obviously I don't get a lot of attention here, but it was pretty interesting. There was a lady that gave me a nice history of the Sod House, and how when you look at the Sod House, there's parts of it that look different than others because they had kind of restructured a little bit, but the original middle part of the Sod House was still standing and in its original form, which is pretty remarkable from the 1890s. And some pretty creative construction ideas back then, and they literally had no money to build anything, and so they had to just create it from the land that was here. And so pretty interesting place to start. I found the lady there showed me some old maps that had old schoolhouses in it. And so yeah, lots of history. And certainly, there's people like that in all kinds of counties around the country that'll tell you histories of the local areas. And so it's nice to stop here, and you can spend an entire day just like listening to the stories from the people that work at these museums. So, but yeah, this is a good place to start. Let's start exploring around the rest of Alfalfa County. Our first town in Alfalfa County that we're exploring is Aline, Oklahoma. And I sat here at what is or was the local gas station. There's a pretty good sign here. I think some good thoughts to live by here in Aline. And it's an interesting town to visit. This is a town of 168 people. It had over 400 at one time. So it's a little over half the population, which isn't bad. Isn't really, you see a lot of towns that lose a lot more than that. The county has lost more population as a percentage than Aline has. But it was, formed in the late 1800s, that land run time, Cherokee outlet, and population grew. They had a railroad come here in 1901, and that really helped connect the farmers to the places they needed to get their crops to. Wheat farming was the kind of dominant thing in this part of Alfalfa County. Later on, there was cotton and alfalfa, and it grew to, like I said, over 400 people. And railroads eventually closed down, or at least stopped shipping out of here, and the population has just dwindled little by little over the decades. It's a pretty interesting downtown to explore. There's quite a few old buildings. There's not much here, but it's pretty interesting to look at. There's an old bank, there's a cool old Coca-Cola advertisement, and an old garage. And so it feels like a ghost town a little bit in the downtown, but you notice there are people here. It's a Saturday, so things are usually in towns like this pretty quiet, and it certainly is today. Carmen is a really interesting place to visit. Lots to see here. Population was over 900 at one time. Now it's down to 360. But in the last census, it did go up by 5. So it's the first time it has gone up since like the 1930s. So hopefully that's a good sign for Carmen. Interesting history. Actually, it started, there was a place called Augusta that was like a mile and a half from here in the 1800s, wheat country. And then the railroad was gonna, I think, plan to go through this area, and eventually they named this New Augusta. And then when the railroad came through, two towns coexisted. They renamed this one Carmen to differentiate it from Augusta, and it was named after a wife of a Mexican politician, I believe. And so it began to flourish. and this became kind of the shipping point for all the agricultural businesses in this area of the county. And like I said, it went up to over 900 people, and then there were multiple railroads that came through here, and then eventually, you know, as they stopped their business through here, the town started to decline, and it's just been very gradual, as you can look at the population figures and see. But still lots to see here, lots of old buildings. There is a old orphanage that's about a mile from here. We're going to go check out at the end of this little tour of Carmen, but lots of buildings to see. It's, you know, reasonable amount of traffic coming through, so I wouldn't say it's busy, but still some life left in Carmen. Really highly recommended place to come and explore. You'll see things like this old firehouse here, and I met a guy as I was walking around, and he worked here, and they were talking about this. They were talking about the grocery store that's across the street from that, and yeah, so it definitely was a more thriving place to live, and now I think it's a pretty cool place to visit. This park has all kinds of old playground equipment. It's like a playground graveyard. Just about 1 mile north of Carmen, I mentioned earlier about an orphanage, and this is it. This is the Independent Order of the Odd Fellows Orphanage of Carmen, Oklahoma. There were two of these built in the early 1900s, one in eastern Oklahoma, and this one was for western Oklahoma. Very impressive building. It was an orphanage till 1944. Then it closed and became a permanent or a private residence, and then a church after that, and then a home for the elderly, and eventually was abandoned in 2015. And then just down the road, this is the Oddfellows Cemetery. Very sparse in how many markers they have here, all from the early 1900s. Just kind of a different kind of a cemetery. And just beyond that pump, off by those trees, is where the building and the orphanage is located. Our next stop is Helena, Oklahoma, and previously I did a Small Town USA video about this town. So if you want to pause it if you never saw it and watch that video, you can take the tour with me today. If you've already seen that video, thank you, and we'll continue on to the next stop here in Alfalfa County. Our next stop is the Caroma Cemetery, and we're right on the edge of the town of Goltry. And the reason I'm here is because actually the first kind of town or community here was Caroma. You know, that was when the land run and all that kind of stuff was going on, and before the railroad came through. And then the railroad decided they wanted to be just, I guess, a little bit up the way here, and the town was moved there and renamed Goltry, and you know, became a pretty prosperous community with a few hundred people. And it's interesting because the population has kind of remained similar, dropped a little bit, but has pretty much been able to stay with a few hundred people, or a couple hundred to 300 people. And oil was discovered here, and they had a strong agricultural business and area and community, and so it was able to stay successful enough to keep its population. There's a significant German population. They said, I've read online that a third of the population here still has a German ancestry. And there's several churches. There's a couple Mennonite churches historically here, and there's one, I believe, that's still here. And then a St. Michael's Catholic church, where there's a cemetery down the way a little bit farther at the end of the county. And so lots to see here, and nice little community, and good to see that it's been able to stay successful. When I started the trip, I mentioned I had been here before and made some other videos. So the next place we're going, I made a full video about Jet, Oklahoma, and the Great Salt Plains Park. And it's a pretty awesome place. Very bumpy road to get here, and but it was a really awesome place. And so if you're interested in seeing what this part of Alfalfa County is like, definitely want to check out that video, and definitely a place to visit if you've never been there. The roads to get to Thrall Cemetery were not too good, so I wasn't quite sure what I'd find, but I love finding these kind of like, it feels like an old pioneer cemetery. I don't know if Thrall was a town or a farm or a family. I didn't find anything about like a post office named Thrall, but little innocent sign on the side of the road. You can pretty much miss it if you're not looking. But pretty cool little old cemetery. This is the unincorporated community of Nescatunga. It sits quietly on the north side of the Great Salt Plains State Park. It originally was settled here by Osage Indians, and members of that tribe led George Sibley to the Great Salt Plains area, and they're believed to be the first white men to see the Great Salt Plains. And the Salt Fork of the Arkansas River flows through the plains here and was known to the Osages as Nescatunga, meaning big salt water. Well, that's going to do it for part one of exploring through Alfalfa County. I was driving down the road here by the Salt Plains and saw this old abandoned house. Thought this would be a good place to stop and wrap up the video. Saw some pretty cool stuff today, from a sod house early in the day all the way through to the Salt Plains and a lot of cool small towns. So hopefully part two coming up next will be just as interesting, as will be in more the northern part of the county. And we'll also be going to the county seat. So it should be interesting. Hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching this video about Alfalfa County, Oklahoma. If you like this video, there are several ways to support the channel. You can donate by hitting the thanks button under the video or purchase Travel with a Wiseguy merchandise. In the description of the video is a link to my website where you can learn more about the channel and sign up for my newsletter. And if you aren't interested in any of that, I'm just happy you took a few minutes out of your day to watch this video and learn more about Alfalfa County, Oklahoma. Now on to the outtakes. Hello, and I hate when my lips smack when I start talking, so I always have to restart. Might be the least secure cemetery I've seen. This is how I found it. Gotta do some mowing over here. That one's a little harder to spin. Pretty sturdy looking. Built by Elmer Reamer. Let's see how good he built it. Pretty darn good. Still spinning. Way to go, Elmer.